Welcome back to Real Takes, where we are all movie love all the time. I'm Ann Stott, and tonight I say that I continue to stand with the people of Ukraine. And I just want to remind everybody that Amnesty International is a great organization that investigates and shines a light on human rights abuses around the world, all over the globe, in many, many countries. But right now there are war crimes and human rights abuses happening in this senseless, inhumane war in Ukraine, and they're a good organization to support as they do their work to document those atrocities and, advocate for victims. So Amnesty International, always a good organization to support. Tonight, we are shifting from Aries into Taurus time, and I'm so excited because we have a movie where we can celebrate both Aries and Taurus artists. So tonight we are talking about the 2021 film Passing, which was the writing and directing debut of actor Rebecca Hall and starred Tessa Thompson, Ruth Negga, and Holland. Now, Rebecca Hall was born and raised in England. Her father is a theater director, Peter Hall, and her mother is an American opera singer, Maria Ewing. And she started acting very young, and over the last 15 years has become kind of a star of the indie filmmaking world. So she starred with Scarlett Johansson in Vicky Cristina Barcelona. She was in a movie we talked about in the fall, Please Give, a Nicole Holofcener film. She's also been in Frost Nixon and Christine and many other films. I always love her acting work. And she was raised in Britain, like I said, and she presents as white, and her parents present as white, but she always knew that there was a question about her mother's father, and there would be these kind of shadowy moments, comments about, well, maybe your grandfather's Native American, or we don't really know where your grandfather's from, that sort of thing, but never fully discussed. And when Rebecca Hall started working in America, this became more and more complicated because she realized that she was being identified as white, and she knew that wasn't totally true. And she would try to say something, but it was hard for her to say something because the family history was so convoluted that she didn't have her own clear language. And after one of these experiences of trying to be honest about what her identity might be, someone gave her the Nella Larson book, Passing, from the 1920s. Now, Nella Larson was a writer and an Aries. She wrote 2 novels and she wrote short stories. She was in and around the Harlem Renaissance, although she didn't write for her whole life. Her books didn't take off in their time. They were published, but they have survived the decades as kind of insightful, sophisticated portrayals of a certain Black experience in a certain time in New York City. And when Rebecca Hall read this book 100 years later, it gave her instant context and language for the experience she'd been having in her family, because the book is about 2 light-skinned Black women, one who has a Black husband and is living a sort of upper middle class life in Harlem. Her husband's a doctor, and an old friend of hers who she bumps into who is passing as white and has a white husband. And the tension that arises from them reconnecting in each of their lives. So Rebecca Hall read this book, and it just, changed her life on many, many levels. But in terms of how to think about herself and how to talk about, what choice her grandfather had made, she also said she read the book and she immediately knew she had to make it as a film. And she said she could see it, like many of the choices and shots that are in the film. She saw when she was reading the book. So the film's shot in a what's called a 4:3 ratio. It's a slightly different aspect ratio than the wide format that we're used to seeing films in now. It's a tighter box. And she really wanted that sort of sense that these characters are boxed in by their lives in various ways. She immediately knew that the film needed to be shot in black and white, not because, oh, it's about black and white, so it has to be black and white, but because black and white isn't really black and white, it's gray, and it's many different shades of gray. And she felt like actually this story about color reflects the fact that the way we talk about race in this country is inadequate and incorrect. You know, that we have this false idea that there's a line and people are black or white, and it's not true, right? So she immediately knew she wanted to shoot in black and white, and apparently many other choices in the film. And she started writing the screenplay right away, like within a week after reading the book. And then she said she put it in a drawer for 6 or 7 years because she didn't think she could do it, and she didn't have the courage to try to get it made. And then finally she got to a point where she felt like she had to make this movie, and she started shopping it around, and she got many rejections for making this film. And some of it was, some people were willing to make the film, they didn't want to make it the way she wanted to make it. They didn't want to make it in black and white, and that was a deal breaker for her. She was absolutely going to make the film in black and white. Other people said it was a great script and a great story, but there wasn't an audience for it, or they didn't see it as commercially viable, which is, you know, what white producers have been saying about films about people of color for 100 years, basically. And basically she got a lot of closed doors until she went to Forrest Whitaker's production company. And his production company makes a point of saying yes to projects that everybody else says no to. And they supported her down the line. I mean, they still had to raise other money, and that was hard. And there was a point where it was going to happen, and then it fell apart, and then they pulled it together again. So it's not like, oh, then it was a breeze, but at least she had some money and producers behind her. And they really supported all of her choices and her vision and how to make this film, which is so beautifully shot. And Rebecca Hall is a Taurus. We're going into Taurus time, and the film, Taurus is the bull, and they can be very stubborn and determined, and they can also be very sweet, and they're also very sensual. And this is a really sensual, tactile film. And Rebecca Hall has said in interviews that the book has a sensuality to it, but it's clear that her vision for it was also very sensual, and that she was bringing a sensuality to the actual filmmaking as well. And so we have this story about these two women, and one of the reasons Rebecca Hall was so drawn to it was that it really digs deeper than just the kind of obvious passing story. The obvious passing story is that Ruth Negga's character is living as a white woman when has, you know, Black family and history. But the story really acknowledges that even though Tessa Thompson is living as a Black woman, there are other ways she's passing. There are other parts of herself and other needs and feelings and experiences that she's masking or glossing over within herself. And Andre Holland, the husband, is also putting on a certain kind of facade that is serving him in some ways and not serving him in other ways. So there's a very kind of sophisticated exploration of the way we all pass on some level, the way we all put on certain masks and tell certain stories and not other stories about ourselves. So there's sort of a deeper, richer exploration of that experience than just the kind of obvious political, racial one. And I just want to say that, you know, Ruth Negga obviously has just been doing beautiful work on stage and screen. She's actually on Broadway right now in Macbeth with Daniel Craig. She was nominated for an Oscar for her performance in Loving. I love Tessa Thompson's work, everything I've seen her in, I really enjoy. And then I love Andre Holland's work too. He, of course, was the adult friend in the third part of Moonlight. He gave such a heartbreaking performance in that film. So the acting work here is just gorgeous. The filmmaking is gorgeous. And this is a story that we don't see very much. And there's some really honest, great interviews with Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga talking about, you know, what drew them to this project and their sort of constant negotiation about the fact that on the one hand, they're Black women, you know, trying to make work in an industry that has been predominantly white for decades, for as long as its existence. And on the other hand, knowing that as light-skinned Black women, they get an in that other Black women might not get, and the sort of guilt that comes along with that. I mean, there's been some really moving discussions around this film in the interviews that I've watched. So I just loved Passing. It was one of my favorite movies from last year. And so exciting to see a directorial debut that was this visually sophisticated and creative. And I really look forward to seeing what Rebecca Hall does next, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera. And, you know, this film, like I said, it really changed her life. Like her family now has a lot of information about her grandfather that they did not have before. And even not just from reading the book, but like the process of making the film, you know, created a lot of change. So it's, you know, it's a beautiful example of the creative process engendering all kinds of change on every level of our lives. So Passing, beautiful film. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching Real Takes. Hit the subscribe button below so the algorithms will tell you when new episodes are out. And if you want to support Real Takes, please visit my Patreon page where you can join at any tier from $2 to $100 per thing I make. The $15 tier is specifically about supporting Real Takes, and you'll get behind the scenes information and be thanked in future videos. See you next Wednesday.